you very much, and I'm honored that so many of you have come out to join us. This is a topic that's really close to my heart for various reasons, and I'm going to share my screen, and I have a slide presentation, so we'll go through that. And
Catherine, I'm going to interject to let everyone know that afterwards, I'm going to send all of you a BCC email with Catherine's slideshow. Also, we're recording her presentation, and the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now.
Great.
Okay. So this is what the book looks like. And it's divided into a lot of different sections, but I will start with why I wrote it. I became a widow at age 33. I was new in Quebec. I had a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. And it was about the last thing that we expected. I had a lot of help during that time. I had a lot of people who came out of the woodwork, people I didn't know who were helpful. But I needed a lawyer to get through all of the things that had to be done. A few years later, my husband's brother died, and he left his wife a notebook that had everything in it that she could need in order to settle his estate. He had advance notice. He was sick for a while, so he knew that that was coming. My husband died in a plane accident, so we were totally blindsided. But it left me understanding how important it is to have things in place, to have all the documents you need in place, and to know where to find them. My husband had a will, which we had made probably about a year before he died. But it had been made in the US, which was where we were living. And after he came to Quebec before we did, and he then was instructed by the bank, not thinking about the will he had just made, he was instructed by someone at the bank to make a holographic will, and he did that, and that's the one that was probated, and that had a lot of ramifications for us. We had to have a family circle to attest to his signature to make sure that he was really the one that wrote it. It wasn't registered with the Chambre des Notaires, which is what is the best thing to do here in Quebec. So there were a lot of hoops to jump through to get everything settled, not to mention the other things that came with dying in a commercial airline accident. So down the road, I became a financial advisor, and I started to see things in my practice about what happens when someone dies, the fights between siblings, the siblings that are the family that's divided where 2 out of 4 siblings are the executors and the others don't know what's going on, or they're cut out of everything. I also learned that my clients had a tough time talking about, particularly about death and making a will, but also about incapacity, because at 30, it's not something you want to think about. You think about it more as you get older, but nobody really wants to talk about it that much. My mother categorically forbade me from having a discussion with my father about what he would want. And when it came to her, I forced the issue with her, and it was helpful because then I knew what needed to be done. But it can be intimidating for people. And talking about what you want to happen to your estate can be confrontational. Your children may not agree with what you have in mind, or they may not agree with each other. So having the conversations and trying to make sure everybody's more or less on the same page can be extremely helpful. So, and it's especially true if there are families that have several different groups. If there are ex-spouses and children from different relationships. All of those things need to be considered and how you want to deal with those things. So when I wrote the book, I divided it into what I think are the 6 most important umbrella categories. And the first one is the people. You have people in your life, and the people who will represent you, that would be your executor if you've died, your mandatory if you are incapacitated. They need to know who to contact, how to reach them, and why. And that includes people who are, if you have pets that need to be taken care of, those people need to be included. And I've recently learned that sometimes it can be interesting to figure out what to do with if you have a big collection of houseplants. People. My mother was so worried about her houseplants, and they ended up staying in the house when we sold it. But it was just interesting that popped up. But you need to list your children, your siblings, relatives, friends. If you have a caregiver or a group of caregivers, they should be listed. Their contact information should be there, and your professional contacts. So people like if you have a lawyer, if you have an accountant, a notary, all of those people should be in a financial advisor. They should all be in your list. And it's great to put the names, but you must also put contact information. And for most people nowadays, it's a cell phone number and an email. Those are usually the best ways to get in touch with people. If you want to familiarize your family with who's in your life, then go through the exercise with them so that they know who it is that you're in touch with and who's important to you, so that they know who they need to notify if something or when something happens to you. It's also a good time to mention who is included in your will so that there won't be any surprises. If it's been known to happen that someone has a child that nobody else in the family knows about, and suddenly the person dies and that child comes up out of the woodwork. And so it's better to get it all out there. Representatives can be your adult children, friends, trustees, anybody who is going to have your power of attorney, your mandate, and or who's going to be your, in Quebec we say liquidator or executor. Elsewhere it's an executor. The power of attorney is active, is something you can give while you're still functioning mentally. When it comes to a mandate, that's the document that gives someone power to represent you when you are incapacitated mentally, usually. So if you have dementia, for example, and there is a process for the mandate, you have to take it to a notary. The notary will present it to the court. The court will send someone to interview you to make sure that you really are not all there. And then eventually the document is stamped and made official. And then you can take that to the bank or to any other thing you have as a mandatory. You go to the places that the person whose mandate you hold is dealing. So when I became a mandatory for a friend, I had to go to the bank. I had to deal with the sale of her house. So all of those things were done under that ability with mandate. And you can divide up those roles. You can have one person be your power of attorney and your mandatory, and you can have somebody else entirely be your liquidator if that's what you want. And sometimes you may, especially when you're talking about a group of siblings, if you name all of them as your liquidators, you have to figure out who's going to handle what, or it would be good to talk about it. Some people are better at some things than others. Like one person might be good on taking care of money. One other person might be good at selling goods, things like that. So those are the things you need to think about. The second topic is paper. So people need to know, your representatives need to know where all your essential papers are. This includes your legal papers, your financial papers, your civil documents, and your medical documents, and medical particularly in the case of incapacity. So legal documents would include your will, your mandate, your power of attorney. If you have divorce decrees or other death certificates or civil documents, but any kind of legal document that you have that somebody might need access to, let them know where it is, write it down. Financial documents could include bank statements and investment statements, possibly loan agreements, things like that. Civil documents are birth certificates, social insurance cards, death certificates, that would be considered civil documents, marriage licenses, things like that. And medical documents, I personally keep a medical history on a Word document so that my kids, if somebody asks them, if I'm incapacitated and somebody asks them if I've had this, that, or that, they'll have the answers there. You need to let them know where you're going to keep these important documents, and it's helpful if you put them all in one place. It may not be that way, but I put all my mother's documents in a folder, and I left them in her house. And the next time I was there, when I had to go to the bank with my father's death certificate, she had moved it from the folder, and I found it after 3 hours of searching in the bottom of a drawer in the last bedroom that I looked in. So, because we were doing a line of credit on the house because we didn't know exactly when it would be sold. And so when I looked for it, and I was worried I couldn't find it, I was thinking I would have to take my father's ashes to the bank to prove that he was dead. Because I really didn't know what to do if I couldn't find it. And so luckily I did. Another thing to think about is if you have sensitive items, do you have old love letters? Do you have diaries that you don't necessarily want someone to read? When I did my friend's house clean out, I found about 2 very large recycling boxes worth of love letters. And I knew the person with whom they'd been exchanged to was not her husband. And so I called him and said, "Do you want these?" And we ended up shredding them. And that was the agreement because they certainly couldn't go to her kids. So if you have private things that you don't want people to see, you need to think about that while you can. If you are a paper hoarder, as I have been over the years, get rid of what you don't need. I got rid of 17 boxes. I had a shredding company come to my place and shred 17 boxes of old documents, which included tax returns going back to the 1970s, the late 1970s. So you only need to keep those for 7 years. And if there are things that you don't need, get rid of them. And if you have clutter on your computer, it's also not a bad thing to clean out. I've started that process myself now. Less is more. The less paper you have, the less mess you have, and the less hassle there is for those people who are representing you. And as I said, if it's on your computer, organize it so that when somebody logs into your computer, they won't know where to find the information that they need. And that's a process that I've started as well, where I have a file called bills and money. I have one for investing. I have one for taxes. And I'm building on that now. And hopefully that will make it easy for my kids to figure out what they need to figure out. Money is another thing. Money is always a potential source of conflict in settling an estate. So you want to make sure that you make a list of all your assets and includes all of your bank accounts, all of your investments, any assets that you have that should be sold. any real estate assets, if you have a cottage, in addition to where you live, what do you want to do with it? Who's going to get it? How is that going to be handled? If you own several apartments and you rent out some of them, what happens to those? Who becomes the owner? So all of those things need to be taken into account. If you have insurance policies, if you have life insurance, or health insurance, or car insurance, make sure those policies are readily accessible and that your representatives know where to find the contact information for the insurance broker or brokers, so that they can cancel the policies when it becomes appropriate to do so. My mother always used to say, I'd rather give with a warm hand. So if you have things that you're not using, think about advanced gifting to children, to grandchildren, things that they may want and that you aren't using. Don't give away the dishes that you have your breakfast on. That's, that goes without saying. But if you have that other set of china that you've been holding on to in case for years and years and years, see if someone else wants it. Where you store your papers is important. Do you keep them in a file cabinet? Are they all on your computer? Do you have a special box? Make sure your representatives know where they are and what they need to do to find it. And if they're on your computer, make sure they know how to access your computer. The other part of money is debt. Do you owe any money? Do you still have a mortgage? Do you have a car loan or a lease? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have any other loans of any kind? So if you do, you need to make sure that whoever is going to settle your estate knows what they are, who they're owed to, and what the steps, who the contacts are to take care of them. And it may be that someone owes you money. Maybe you've lent money to your children that they're repaying, or to some other family member or friends. Or maybe you've made a loan to a business, or you might have a refund coming from something. All of those things should be noted as well. I have, for example, my son is a chef. He's in several restaurants, and when they were starting, I lent them money, which is being reimbursed. But I have provisions in my will for what happens to that loan if something happens to me. So those are things that it's important to think about. Another thing that we underestimate greatly, I think, is our digital footprint. And it's become a popular term, the digital footprint. And most of us probably have a larger one than we think we do. There are shopping websites. Anytime you buy something online, you're probably asked for your email, and they've got all your information for shopping, on buying whatever. So you want to make sure that those are closed down. You want to make sure that if you have coupon sites like Groupon or something like that, make sure that you know which ones those are, so that they can be closed down as well. If you have subscriptions, if you belong to, like, I have a Montreal library card, and I use the online library quite a lot. And so I download ebooks to read if I don't feel like going to the library. So that would have to be canceled. Newspapers, if you have a newspaper subscription, the Globe and Mail, the Gazette, the Devoir, whatever, or magazines, online magazines, or physical magazines too, by the way, need to be canceled. But on all of those things should be canceled. If you're on social media, if you're on Facebook, Instagram, WT Trust, there's so many of them now. Blue Sky, Twitter, or X, excuse me. So you may or may not be on some or any or none of those, but if you are on some of them, those accounts need to be closed down, and I'll talk about that a little bit more further on. If you subscribe to things like Microsoft Office or Quicken, which is a personal financial software, Or if you have professional software, if you're doing art and you're using Adobe products, or if you need bookkeeping and you're using something like FreshBooks, all of those things have to be stopped. They need to know where to go to do that, and to make sure that your estate is not being charged for services that you're no longer using. If you are signed up at something like Canada Helps, at any charitable giving sites, those need to be closed down. Um, you may have bought products through Kickstarter or Indiegogo. So if you're signed up on those sites, that's another one. The government sites, the CRA, Revenue Quebec, Service Canada, all of them need to be notified as well. Payment methods, if you use PayPal or any other online payment method other than e-transfer from the bank, that is something else to consider too. And then that brings me to banking. Your banking and your investment account logins, your representatives will need that information, and they'll need to be able to close the account. Also true for Hydro and whoever your phone is with, whether it's Videotron or Rogers or Bell. So your phone and internet, all of those things need to be taken care of. And if you have an alarm system in your house or apartment, your representatives need the codes, and they also need to know who to contact to close it down. One thing that your representatives will probably need is your cell phone. Many of us don't have a paper address book anymore. And so if your contacts are all in your phone or on your computer, they're going to need to be able to access those. If you visit websites that you don't want your family to know you're visiting, then you should probably delete the login yourself while you still can, or entrust a trusted friend to do it for you if the occasion arises. If you're using dating sites or meetup sites and you're logged into those also should be deleted. Years ago, I was on a dating site, and there was a picture of somebody that I recognized. I had to think about it for a few minutes, but I finally realized it was someone whose obituary I'd seen in the Gazette 2 weeks earlier. So clearly, his family either didn't know or they hadn't yet gotten around to deleting his profile. But those kinds of things do stay there if nobody takes care of it. If you don't leave information about the accounts that you have, they can go on for quite some time. There are now mechanisms for leaving legacy contacts. Facebook has a way to do that, and I think many of the others have now developed that as well. It's also true that if you have online storage, if you're using Dropbox or iCloud or OneDrive or Google Drive, those are probably the most popular ones, then you need to make sure that your executor or liquidator knows how to get to those. Apple is notoriously hard to negotiate with if you don't have the proper information, but they've now made it really easy by going in the settings. If you have an Apple device, you can go in the settings and you can designate your legacy contact there. And they actually, when I did it for my son, they produced a document that I printed and that I have in my file, so that if he needs proof, he's got that. So those are things that we really, really do need to talk about. The next part is stuff. Stuff is it's a topic that many people have trouble with. There are a number of cartoons that have made the rounds lately of an older man standing in front of a garage. The door is open, the garage is full, and he's saying to his son, "One day, my son, all this will be yours." And the son is going, "Ah." So even a house that's minimalist in appearance, and my parents' house was very much like that. Nothing was out, I can't tell you how many boxes of stuff I found that I had no idea were in that house when I cleaned it out. So even when it's not showing when you walk in the door, there can still be a lot of stuff hidden. So if you make a practice of getting rid of the things you don't need anymore, whether you give them or sell them or throw them away, it will be very helpful to those who are coming in to clean up after you. If you are the one who's cleaning out a family home and you can afford to pay the fees, it can be helpful to hire someone to help you do it. And I actually have made that recommendation to my kids because I'm the kind of person, I will open a box of my mother's stuff and I'll take something out and I'll go, oh yeah. And 30 minutes later, I can still be sitting there going, oh yeah. And it's not helpful. And sometimes it takes somebody who doesn't have a vested interest or an emotional attachment to whatever it is you're looking at to say to you, okay, make a decision, in or out. So that's sorry. Um, if you're leaving instructions, um, Jason, can you mute me for a minute? I have to cough. I can't mute myself.
I think Jason is missing an action, so go ahead and cough. We'll all understand, Catherine.
I'm so sorry.
No
Okay.
problem.
So when you're leaving instructions, list the organizations and the people and charities who could benefit from what you can give away. There are a lot of refugees that have come into Quebec who need things. And there are organizations who will do that. And you can find them on Facebook. You can find them online. So that's one way to do it. If you have stuff you just want to get rid of and you think somebody else could use it and you don't know who to give it to, you can try FreeCycle, which is an organization. You can access them online. There's a Montreal group. You post what you have and where to pick it up, and somebody will come. Because there'll be somebody who will want it. What we also have to recognize is that the emotional value that we attribute to something may not be the market price. You might have really loved something, but you're ready to give it up, but it may not be worth what you think it is. And that can be true of jewelry. It can be true of furniture. It can be true of all kinds of things. The other thing to think about too is, generally speaking, we're living longer and our kids have already feathered their own nests. They don't want a lot of our stuff. I'm going to do the terrible thing and put a cough drop in my mouth. I'm sorry.
While you're digesting your cough drop, Catherine, I just want to remind everyone, especially those who joined a little late, that afterwards I'm going to send all of you a BCC email with Catherine's slides. Also, we're recording, and a video of her presentation will be posted on the Atwater Library YouTube channel.
And maybe we can cut out the coughs. I'm ready to go.
Great.
Okay, so if there are things that you have that are of real value that can be sold at auction, be specific about that. Write down, my parents had furniture that they wanted us to sell at auction. And it was furniture that neither of us, neither my brother nor I, had the room to take. So it got sold. And if there are things that should stay in the family, you may want to make a note either with a sticker on the item or in a letter that you add to your will of who should get what. You can leave letters. The letter attached to a will that is not part of the will does not have the same force that anything that is enshrined in the will has. So if it's a letter you want to hope that the person reading the letter is going to respect it. If you really want to make sure that that doesn't change, you should insert it in your will legally. My mother also said, if you're keeping stuff to use for special occasions, just use your best things. You are your own best company. That quote from my mother. And the other thing that's important to talk about are final wishes. If you have preferences about how your last service should go, you should write them down. If you don't, my very Irish friend had a very Scottish bagpiper at her funeral, which I think her kids thought she would really like, and perhaps she might have, but I'm not sure that was what she had planned. So if you want, if you know, if you don't want to have rap at your funeral and you'd rather have Bach, write it down. It's important to have the people who take care of your last trip should respect your wishes. So you should make sure they know. You can consider setting up a pre-arrangement. It can help your survivors because they will be in a vulnerable position. And it will help them to deal with the sales pressure. Funeral homes have a bottom line, and it's in their best interest to sell you the extra votive candle and the extra book of thoughts and whatever other things they have, along with the various options that are there for caskets or cremation containers and all that kind of thing that you have to deal with. There are also some direct cremation sites that are online that are effective as well. And you can just have a service or a dinner. The best funeral I went to was a meal in a little Italian restaurant where we all sat around and told stories of the person who had passed away. And it was lovely. But it's also very much dependent on what your beliefs are, how your rituals in your family go. So it's a very personal thing, and you need to set it up the way you want it. If there's a particular church or temple or whatever that you want to have your service at, make sure that's been noted. And there are also funeral services for pets, and that's another place where you can end up spending a lot more money than you thought you would. So that's another place not to succumb to sales pressure. The material in the book applies to what happens when you're incapacitated or you've passed away, but it's also maybe useful for younger people to look at because it can help them maybe think about how much they accumulate over the years. One thing I have seen among the friends of my kids is that there is a tendency to be a bit more minimalist. And I think certainly when you're young and you're living in Montreal and you move every couple of years, having a lot of stuff to carry around is a burden, and it's difficult. And I moved every 3 years from the time I was a baby until I was in my 40s. So I know what it's like to have to move often. And the less you have to carry around, the easier it is. The preparation of this particular document is a service, the great service and a gift to those who will have to take care of what you leave behind. It's hard enough emotionally when you're attached to someone and you lose them. So having instructions make it easier to work through. And I've talked to people who've had those instructions and they've been so grateful, and it's left a really positive memory of their parents and how much their parents cared about what they were doing. So my hope is that this book will help you to navigate that. And the second half of the book is is a workbook. So you can fill it out in the book. And if you have the book and you want to have a PDF of the lists, they are available as well. So, and I think that's this is the last bit. This is where you can get it.